Self-striping sock yarns are generally made with hand knitters in mind, but we, with knitting machines, can make use of them also if we keep a few things in mind, and this video is about those things. Usually these are number 1 yarns. That makes them suitable for standard gauge machines. You saw me knitting on a Brother 892. These yarns are typically 75%, maybe 80% superwash wool, which means they won't shrink and felt when you wash them, plus either some nylon, lycra, or polyamide content. This makes them a little bit stretchy, and they hug the foot wonderfully well because of that stretch. I really love these yarns, and so I make a lot of socks with them. Socks made with such yarns wear very well. They are worth the extra money. And this is the most recent pair I have designed. Regia is probably the most famous of these yarns. I believe it's made in Germany. Opal is another, and they're great. But they do have competitors, and some of the competitors are less expensive. I have recently been working with Mary Maxim Step Softly. That's what these socks are. It is a little bit less expensive and still performs very well, as does Mary Maxim Festive Feet yarn. It's usually offered only at holiday time and then goes on sale afterwards, so you can watch for that. The self-striping effect is achieved by space dyeing the yarn. So you don't get perfect stripes every single row, but the overall effect is pretty convincing. Looking at the seam on this single bed sock, you can see that the stripes match up approximately, but not perfectly. That's simply a feature of space dyeing and not something we can do anything about. But it does beat having to weave in a million ends to get stripes. At least I think so. In order to get 2 socks that truly match, it's critical that we start at the same exact point in the color repeat for sock 2 as we did for sock 1. Here I started just as the brown stripe ended and changed to pink. So I need to do that for the second sock as well. This requires that I keep pulling out yarn from the skein until I come to the same point in the color pattern again. And this is how much yarn I had to pull out before I could match up for the second sock. Don't be dismayed at the waist. You can make doll clothes and baby socks out of anything that has to be removed from the ball. I have an entire Winter Wonderland Barbie outfit made from leftover sock yarn, exactly from this process of finding the right point to start an adult sock number 2. And I will put a link to that playlist and to the one for the baby socks in the program notes. For the yarn to feed smoothly on the knitting machine, it's best to rewind it. I use my Nancy's ball winder for this purpose. This winder and other similar ones creates yarn cakes rather than cones. And those cakes pulled from the center feed very nicely through the tensioning device on the knitting machine. I like my sock fabric dense, so I aim for 8 stitches per inch in these yarns. It's best to wash and dry the sock swatch before you take your gauge. But if you are impatient, just letting it rest for at least an hour will be relatively accurate. What we're after is a fabric dense enough that you don't feel the stitches. That bothers the soles of your feet, at least some of us. But you don't want the fabric to feel stiff as a board either. And for me, in these number 1 yarns, 8 stitches per inch usually works great. But you can be surprised what number it takes on the stitch dial to get that gauge. I would have predicted maybe 5 or 6 if you asked me to guess, possibly even 4. But in actual fact, my most recent sock, made on the Brother 892, required 7 plus 1 dot on the stitch dial to get that. The reason is that the pulling in of the elastic portion of the fiber can be significant. Even so, there really are no problems knitting. It feeds through every machine I have that's a suitable gauge just fine. Most sock yarns of this sort come in 3.5 ounce, otherwise known as 100-gram skeins. That is enough for most ladies up to size 8, 8.5 socks with an average sock top height. Knee socks obviously require more because of their greater length. Most men will require part of a third skein, and sometimes larger ladies do as well. Here's what works for me. In our household, we wear ladies size 6.5 and men size 10.5 socks. My 6.5s never use the entire 3.5 ounces. One fresh skein plus my leftovers will usually make my husband's socks, unless I have to pull out an extraordinary amount to make the pattern match up. Up until now, I've shown you single bed socks made with hand knitting sock yarns. This book will interest those of you who have double bed setups, whether a European true double bed or a Japanese machine plus ribber. The yarn does an equally nice job on a double bed setup. I love using it on my Passip and Superba. These socks are knitted using the second bed to create the ribbing. Then we rotate around to a tubular position and finish the sock. And using tubular knitting, there are fewer hitches where the colors change. They still do exist as a part of space dyeing, but the stripes move more continuously around the foot, as you can imagine. I will place a link to this book in the program notes in case that's something that interests you. I do have other sock videos on actually making socks out of yarns like this, and I hope you'll enjoy them and enjoy working with hand knitting sock yarns.